offer some alternative ways that we can express the spirit of giving. And then I'll end with some thoughts about the humanist free-thinking gift of knowledge that's represented by the tree in our lobby that we'll dedicate and decorate later. We also will do the dictionary project upstairs, which was just happened to occur on this day, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful example of the gift of knowledge. When Malcolm X spent years in prison, he read the dictionary from front to back, and it created in him an absolute love for knowledge. Now, I grew up in a pretty secular environment. Christmas, though, was a big deal for me and my brothers because of presents, the loot, the booty. Like most of our friends, we looked forward to December 25th to unwrap these things. We were primed by television and anticipated with glee the coolest new toys. And I was very good at letting Santa know what to leave under my tree. A little bit like Ralphie from the wonderful film A Christmas Story, who wanted nothing more than a Red Ryder carbine action 200-shot range model air rifle. I learned to drop hints in every way imaginable. And like Ralphie, at one point I wanted a gun. In my case, it was a Johnny 7. Anybody remember Johnny 7? 7 ways to kill. Pistol, rifle, machine gun, grenade launcher, anti-ballistic missile, a bayonet, and I think a gas thrower or something. I was not raised in ethical culture. On Christmas mornings, my brothers and I had a somewhat grotesque ritual. We'd come downstairs and then we'd separate the presents and we'd pile them on a chair or one end of the couch, and then we'd compare and contrast size and number of gifts. And then with mock indignation, we'd complain if our pile was smaller. Then we would lustfully unwrap each present, but slowly so as to have the sweet nectar of consumerism come over us over the course of the day. So sweet and so spoiled. But maybe it was Christmas karma, but when I grew up to be a teenager, I began to pay the price for this sort of materialistic conditioning as a child. I began to grow a sense of anxiety as Christmas approached, because as I began to shop for gifts to give to my family members, I began to worry that I wasn't giving them the perfect gift. Somewhat predictably, it seemed to me that the very success of the holiday seasons depended on me getting the right present, getting the perfect present for all my family members. So I would comb the stores, finding inadequate choices. Unlike when I was a young child, when I could give my mother a tiny 10-cent trinket wrapped up in tissue paper, and she'd go, "Ooh, ah, that's so beautiful." As a teen, I thought my gifts were inadequate. I had limited funds. I usually waited too long to start shopping. And I recall feeling helpless and hopeless as I combed the stores back and forth 2 or 3 times, thinking, what would be the perfect gift to give my mother? And as the cheerful Christmas music began to swell, it made the gloom grow even deeper. Now, I say to myself, it's Christmas Eve, I don't have the stuff that I need to get, I'm not done, and I would anticipate the great disappointment caused by my feeble attempts to demonstrate sufficient consumerist appreciation and love to my family. I felt rising guilt heading towards a crescendo on Christmas morning. Now, I haven't fully outgrown this perverse conditioning. My wife reminds me of this as I fight the urge most holiday seasons to run out and get one extra present for one of our children who might think that their pile was too small. But my children, thank goodness, do not compare or contrast their gifts. Only I do that in my head. I think to myself, what if they did compare? What if they thought that we loved them less because their pile was smaller? That was the twisted adolescent American consumer inside of me asking. I was a weird kid. Well, obviously everybody here is unique, and we all figure out this holiday season in the materialistic swells in our own way. Not all children confuse consumerism and love. But I bet many people, some of you perhaps, felt this or still feel this anxiety, because we're bombarded with messages about how we have to give just the right gift to demonstrate our love and to earn being loved. For example, we're reminded how important diamonds are to romantic relationships. In TV commercial, clueless fathers are guided by their knowledgeable children to go to Jared to get that perfect bracelet. And De Beers, one of the oldest materialistic advertising campaigns for diamonds, said you have to give diamonds because diamonds are forever. That was their phrase. To make sure that diamonds keep going, the same advertising agency for De Beers sold America on the belief that, quote, candies come, flowers come, furs come, but such ephemeral gifts fail to satisfy a woman's psychological craving for a renewal of romance. Is that right, honey? Well, this holiday season is no different, whether we're talking diamonds or DVDs. Last week we witnessed America's equivalent to Spain's running of the bulls, Black Friday. I mean, we had hordes of shoppers camping out in front of malls, armed with pepper spray, no less, getting ready to sprint from the doors, through the aisles, and to the checkout line to be the first one to have their arms full of booty. And this way they felt that these intrepid customers could demonstrate not only that they love their family, but they love America too. You hear that a lot, right? Despite recession or despite terrorism, we'll show the rest of the world we're not going to compromise our lifestyles. So buy lots and buy more. Now, my sarcasm and cynicism infecting the talk, I know that there's a consumerist conspiracy theory that I've read about. But I think it's true. I've read a number of social critics talk about how our version of modern capitalism in America survives greatly on our sense of inadequacy. If we could be made to feel inferior or lonely or unloved, then we can be sold on the one surefire way that we can overcome our crisis. Buy lots of junk that makes us feel important, that we can give to those who we hope to impress or yearn to love. Is this the best that capitalism can offer us? Well, over 100 years ago, Felix Adler, who founded the ethical culture movement, was well aware of the dangers of America's form of capitalism. From his perspective, we mastered the art of conspicuous consumption, but we didn't find ourselves any happier, only more hectic, and in some ways more melancholy. We slave long hours so that we can afford to buy shallow entertainment that adds little real meaning to our lives. He writes, "It has been said that the modern world is divided between the hot and hasty pursuit of affairs in the hours of labor, and then the no less eager chase of pleasure in the hours of leisure. But even our pleasures are calculated and businesslike. We measure our enjoyments by the sum expended. Our salons are little better than bazaars of fashion. We wander about empty festive halls chewing artificial phrases which we neither believe nor want to be believed. We breathe a stale and insipid perfume from which the spirit of joy has fled. The brief exhilaration of the dance, the physical stimulus of wine and food, the nervous excitement of a game of hazard, perhaps these make up the sum total enjoyment in by far the majority of our so-called parties of pleasure. Surely of all things melancholy in American life, American mirth is most melancholy." Now, of course, some Americans can't afford to be in festival halls or dances or in parties of pleasure either, and they have a far different reaction to this time in America. The focus on buying for people who can't buy has a very different impact on them. Even in the optimistic dawn of the 20th century, when Adler was writing, Americans did not always have the option for dizzying, drunken materialism. The author O. Henry penned The Gift of the Magi in 1906. And my wife Maureen and I began a little tradition a couple of years ago that reminds us of the spirit of giving and the trap of consumerism. Late at night, when not a creature is stirring, we would read this story to each other, the story of Della and Jim. I love this story because even though I'm much luckier than Della regarding my access to privilege, I identify with her anxiety. How many people know that story? Just raise your hands up. Okay. Despite a year of scrimping and saving, Della is left on Christmas Eve with only $1.87 to buy a gift for Mr. James Dillingham Young, the husband she loves. This young couple boasts only two possessions of value: Della's long, beautiful hair and Jim's beautiful watch. And now she has little to offer Jim on the holiday. O. Henry writes, only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of being owned by Jim. So she's confronted starkly with a choice, and she decides to sell her hair to a wig maker. She passes the Broadway store that displays a beautiful case with a tortoiseshell, jewel-rimmed combs that she imagined one day might adorn her long, lush hair. But with trembling breath and teary eyes, she goes anyway, sells her hair, and returns home with a silver fob chain to go on Jim's watch. It was going to replace what she thought was an embarrassing old leather strap currently on Jim's watch. When Jim eventually returns home, he stares at Della, and she fears that he doesn't think she's pretty anymore because she has what she calls the haircut of a truant schoolboy. I'm going to let O. Henry conclude the story. My wife Maureen and I will share reading a portion of it. Della responds to Jim as follows.
Jim, darling, she cried, don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you.
You've cut off your hair? Asked Jim laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact, yet after even the hardest mental labor.
Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm me without my hair, ain't I?
Jim looked around the room. You say your hair is gone? He said with an air of idiocy.
You needn't look for it, said Della. It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it went for you. Maybe the hairs on my head were numbered, she went on with sudden, serious sweetness. But nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?
Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year, what's the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat and threw it upon the table. Don't make any mistake, Dell, he said, about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going for a while at first.
White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the Flat.
For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped long in that Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell and jeweled rims, just the shade to wear in her beautiful, vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone.
But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, my hair grows so fast, Jim. And then Della leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, oh, oh! Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly upon her palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it.
Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands in the back of his head and smiled. Dell, he said, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use just at the present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. Now suppose you put the chops on. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving presents, Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. But here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in the last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Oh, all who give and receive gifts, such as they are wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi. Oh, come on. I love that story. But, were Della and Jim foolish? Did they fall prey to crass materialism? After all, they had little money to spare and few possessions to squander. Were they fools for spending such things on these gifts? On selling their watch and their hair? Should they have used their money in more practical ways? Maybe for health insurance, job training, put it away for a college fund, for a future child? Maybe these are just questions of a Scrooge or a Grinch, right? Because this is a love story after all. But I love this story because it's a love story where the irony radiates not greed, but gratitude. Not materialism, but relationship. Della and Jim give each other a watch fob and a comb set, but that's just on the surface. Inside, they're really giving up their most prized material possessions. Their mutual love is expressed not in what they acquire, but what they give away. And this is a familiar story that we've all heard. And it's why I love it so much. Now, perhaps it would have been different for me as a child had my gift buying and giving been more of a sacrifice. But it wasn't the lack of cash that made me anxious as a kid. What dominated my thoughts was this aching need for some artificial and material shoring up of what I saw as tenuous or tentative family relations. So it strikes me odd during this holiday season that we spend so much of our time shopping alone. And I think to myself, wouldn't it be better if we spent more time not shopping together? This is what in part motivates ethical culture leader Susan Rose when she promotes Buy Nothing Day, which happens to occur on the same day as Black Friday. And Buy Nothing Day, which was started by Adbusters about 20 years ago, entails simply buying nothing. This day reminds us of how conditioned we are to buying things. Try going through one day without buying anything. It's not always easy unless you just lock the door to your house and stay inside. And even there, online, maybe calling to you. But Buy Nothing Day also has a chance for us to reflect on those who don't have the pocket cash to buy the luxuries that we kind of take for granted. Now, as part of Buy Nothing Day, there are some groups that have added some community and comedic elements, which I think are fun to hear about. You can go on the web and listen to them talk about the credit card cut-up, where people gather in the middle of malls, take out their credit cards, scissor in hand, and invite others to come to put an end to debt with one simple snip. There's also the zombie walks, where people gather and wander around shopping malls with a blank stare, a humorous lampoon about the mindless consumerism which gets the word out about buying nothing. And there's an event called the Whirl Mart, where people gather in a store and go with their shopping carts in a long, weaving conga line through all the aisles without ever putting anything in their basket or making any purchases. I think it's kind of like vigilante anti-consumerism. Now, while these activities are fun, I again say that I haven't given up my anxiety about gift giving. And if you're at all like me and you're still entranced by this gift-giving tradition, whether it's secular or whether it's involved with Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, there is middle ground between buying nothing and buying something. So instead of driving to a chain mall, you can try some local alternatives. A lot of cities, I'm sure Philly has them, has alternative gift fairs, where you can buy things for your friends and families, like a month's supply of formula for somebody in a poor area of the world, or an acupuncture session for a wounded veteran, or meals for a homebound senior for a week. In the past, I've given my nieces and nephews a donation to the Heifer Project, which helps create sustainable food solutions around the world, so they get a card with that donation in their name. Many other people, and the Ethical Society here also donates to Kiva, a microlending program in the names of people. Kate Esposito tries to get resources off the web at the Center for a New American Dream, which has got lots of ideas about different ways to approach this gift-giving season. You can get there on newdream.org. Winter festivals at the Ethical Societies in Washington and in Brooklyn have gift-making tables where children sit together, share resources, and make either candle art, little candle holders, or ornaments. Some ethical societies have local craft fairs where artists donate their goods and then all the proceeds go to good works. The Ethical Society of St. Louis and Washington has a giving tree tradition where families buy gifts for people in need in the area. And even though this involves buying, it's usually basic necessities like hats or mittens, and they decorate the tree with those. And while this sort of buying is buying still, at least it lets us bend this habit to buy in a more altruistic and sensible direction. But my favorite is something that we've done a little bit at our house, and Ann Clayson, the leader of the New York Society of Ethical Culture, talks a lot about. Her family makes coupons for either household tasks or for doing things together, whether it's doing the kids say, I will do the laundry for a week, or make dinner for you and Dad, or whatever it is, or things just like a coupon for going to a movie together or taking a walk together. Instead of shopping alone so much for others, a more meaningful and ethical humanist way to give is to give our time and our attention, something that is often in scarce supply. Being present for each other is one of the greatest gifts I think we can give. Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, who I've spoken about before here, says, the precious gift we can offer each other is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. Now, Han knows that being present for others is not always easy. Even for him, it does take practice. So often we run off into the future. What thing am I going to cross off my holiday list today? What food am I going to serve when my relatives come? Or we're mesmerized about the past, angry with what our boss told us, or thinking I could have done something better about that situation last week. I think Americans are particularly poor at focusing on the present. And often we only avoid thinking about the past or the future when we're either drugged or meditated by television. And in those cases, we're not really present for each other anyway. While my mother struggled much of her life to be in the present, it was only later in her life, when she found some peace by overcoming her addictions, that she was able to push away this materialistic worry and this focus on worries about the past or concerns about tomorrow. She never really gave up consumerism, but she was able to give the gift of her presence, especially to my children. She shared her time and her colorful personality with them generously. I remember she said with a renewed sense of liberation that the moment, right now, is a gift. That's why she would say they call it the present. The moment, right now, is a nice present to get and to give. So like my mother, I am more consumerist than Buddhist, but I try being ever more fully present to others every day. And perhaps it's good timing that the Buddhists celebrate Bodhi Day on December 8th. That's the day that the Buddha attained enlightenment. So this coming Thursday on December 8th, I'm going to take a moment to remember an important part of Buddhist advice. Buddhism counsels that we choose to follow a middle way between the two extremes of excessive self-indulgence and excessive self-mortification, between hedonism and asceticism. Now similarly, I'm going to try to change a middle way into a middle way about giving my gifts. So in the spirit of giving, I'll do my holiday shopping, but I'll try to do it more moderately. As part of my commitment to ethical humanism, I'm going to put relationships first. I hope to remember also, like Della and Jim, that it's better to give than to receive. And I'll strive not just to wrap my presents, but mindfully to be present. So today we've gathered to be present with each other, all of us in this room. That's a gift. It's also a gift that brings us to the tree of knowledge, soon to be decorated in our lobby. The gift of knowledge. Before I ever heard about ethical humanism, I had fallen in love with philosophy. I read about how it flourished in ancient Greece, in part because Athens was rich enough to pay people to think unpractical thoughts. For those struggling to survive, whether in ancient Greece or today, philosophy can seem a bit frivolous. And maybe it is. But philosophy in my life stimulated an inner evolution for which I'm deeply grateful. First, it opened up a world of ideas that are alternatives to crass materialism. I began to appreciate that ideas can be more fun than stuff, that thinking can be better than buying, that concepts can be more fun than consumerism. Not everybody knows that. Secondly, philosophy opened me up to this marvelous collective history of ideas. The more I read and shared about ideas that came through us through our history, the more I felt a sort of awe and amazement and connection to something bigger than myself that's at the heart of ethical humanism. A network of names began to grow inside of me, many of them that will be on our tree later. I learned of Aristotle and Aquinas, Darwin and Du Bois, Ingersoll and Einstein, Jefferson and Jacobi, Paine and Popper, Seneca and Stanton, Wilson and Wine. And they give me almost unlimited ideas. Ideas that can be shared without depletion. So I wonder sometimes, what if everybody had access to the unlimited world of the mind? Would there be less ruthless competition in the world of the marketplace? And third, philosophy and free thought impressed upon me the importance of freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and freedom of conscience. They free us from the arrogant stultification of certainty. Education, when done well, is a humbling experience. It's a constant process of overcoming our own inevitably limited perspectives. The humanist tradition of collective learning helped me to appreciate how diversity of thought is fundamental to our slow, steady progress in this world. Diversity is not something we simply tolerate. It's something we need, we promote, and we celebrate. So I want to thank Margaret Downey, the Free Thought Society, and all the work that they've done. The Tree of Knowledge is now a part of our Humanist celebration this holiday season, so I urge you to join us in the lobby at the conclusion of the program to dedicate and decorate the tree. And by covering the tree with simple book covers, we honor the awe, the connection, and the humility that has been wrapped up in the gift of knowledge. This gift has been handed to us by generations of thinkers willing to take risks, ask questions, and seek understanding. And this tree now represents this ethical society's dedication to take risks, ask questions, and seek understanding. The gift of knowledge is, after all, an open, evolving process. This is why books of different faiths are decorating the tree. Our commitment to free thought and ethical humanism is about taking in, not about shutting out. It's about dialogue, not dogma. In Breaking the Spell, Daniel Dennett recommends that everyone learn more, not about only their own traditions and ideas, but about ideas and traditions strange and foreign to them. This best demonstrates to me shared faith in human experience and reason. We owe it to ourselves and to the future generations. Dennett says, provocatively, if you have to hoodwink or blindfold your children to ensure that they confirm their faith when they're young adults, your faith ought to go extinct. Do you agree? Maybe, maybe not. Hold on to that. Think, follow your head and your heart, but stay involved in the discussion. So how's this about one last alternative to the gift-giving madness? How about if you buy one of the books that goes up on our tree, or any book that you think will broaden your horizon, and donate it to a local library or school? But before you do that, read it. Share it with others. Think about it. Get engaged in discussion. And maybe late at night, when not a creature is stirring, read it to that person you care most about. Happy Humanist holidays to you all. Thank you for coming.